All right. And we are live. Thank you, Mr. Dudley, for getting this to go. It's been a challenge. There's a bunch of bugs in the works today. I will repeat, there is a persistent and ongoing zero-day exploit that affects everything that touches the internet to the highest echelons of American society. I'm joined today by our brother, Cody at Wranglerstar. For those who've been living underneath a rock, Cody's been on YouTube probably longer than some of y'all have been alive. He's a West Coast man, and it was my honor and my pleasure to get to meet him during Hurricane Helene deployment. And yeah, he's the real deal. And so I enjoy when we get to be able to have a conversation. Cody, I know you have a bunch of stuff going on up there where you are, so thanks for making time to be with us today. What's the situation look like where you are?
Yeah, it's we got pretty well got spared. We're at the southern part of Washington, up north, up around Seattle. It's just tremendous, the amount of damage. A lot of it's not being covered on the national media. Thousands and thousands of homes, levees and dikes that are bursting, and just the hits. I don't. It's hard to figure out where it comes from. I think what it is like it's poor prevention, it's overbuilding, I think it's overlogging, and just classic problem is that the government is not putting money back into infrastructure, and those chickens are coming home to roost.
The government doesn't have money to put back into infrastructure. It's one of the things that I think most people simply don't realize is they think that things are a little bad right now, but it'll be okay again. And based upon all the research and all the intelligence that I gather daily, that's not the case. You know, this government shutdown that we had a couple of months ago, that happened for a lot of reasons. But, you know, the dollar is losing value daily. The government coffers are not full. This whole idea of we brought in $18 trillion from tariffs. No, you haven't. That hasn't happened. And so the federal government is hand to mouth right now, as far as revenue is concerned. And the state governments are in many cases highly dependent upon federal funds just to be able to function, which is not how the 10th Amendment is supposed to work, but yet here we are. And so, you know, I see the system as we know it right now is completely unstable, we cannot be dependent upon it, and I think we have to be dependent upon the Creator and ourselves and our family and our community in order to have that appropriate network for the preservation of life. I know that there's been several people up in your area that have been out working. I think you've gone out and helped people that needed to be helped. What has the local response looked like there?
Well, you know, I guess the kind of the vibe I'm getting, I think most of us that have been in this game for a long time I've always understood for the last 20 years that the government does not have a plan. There's this idea that they've got it all under control and they've got a plan for every situation. They're barely getting by on their own. And I don't know that, like you said, I don't think there's a whole lot of resources to spread around. At least they're not showing that they have the ability to do it here. Out here where we live, we've put a lot of thought into when I first started doing this, I guess I'll back up a little bit. You know, I was very prideful, and I got the message, I got the health message, I got the get out of the city message from God 20 years ago. And I wanted to go, and I thought, well, I'll just go do this myself. I'll build an off-grid place, and I'll be able to handle any situation. And, you know, what I've come to find out is that's just not going to work. You have to have community. You have to have resources. I mean, you got to sleep so you can't pull guard on your house. You can't grow up. I mean, it's just too much work for one man. So we were really careful and did a lot of thought into the area that does it have access to natural food, a community that's like-minded, that kind of gets it and is going to get on board and going to pull together in these times when we have to rely on each other. So I can speak to this particular area. It's phenomenal. I mean, we're surrounded by loggers, which are super capable. A lot of construction guys, organic valley, a lot of dairy farms, a lot of water, natural irrigation. It's a good spot. So for here, we have a local community page. All of the women are kind of on that, and the message just kind of goes out. So and so has a tree on their house. So guys would go over there. So and so needs new shingles because they all blew off. And so it kind of it was funny when we showed up to start helping some folks with their roof. We would be there, and there would already be people there, already guys there. So the outpouring here is pretty tremendous, but it is a little bit of a bubble. When you live in these rural areas, these austere environments, people understand you have to be polite, you have to be neighborly, because no one's going to save you, and you might really have to depend upon your neighbors, and that's kind of just understood in this particular area.
That's a great word. One of the things that I want to emphasize based upon what you said is, I think for a lot of people, that maybe even people that are watching this show right now, there seems to be the perception that to do these things is optional, that you might have, A, you have plenty of time, and that B, you might not need to do these things. Preparedness and more of a holistic approach to preparedness. And I just want to state publicly that for your long-term survivability, these things are not optional. You need people, you need capabilities. And if you haven't started down this path yet, you're not behind the power curve, but you're dangerously close to behind the power curve based upon the timeline that I believe that we are on. And what the period of time that we live in right now is the historical anomaly. For most of mankind's existence, we've worked really, really hard, and it's been very, very dangerous outside the four walls that we have constructed with our own bare hands. And right now we have and have had a period of relative peace, relative safety and prosperity here in the United States of America, and that's going to go away. And so having resiliency, having network, having capabilities is not an option for long-term survivability going forward. Did I lose you there? Did you catch that?
You're back. I lost the last 20 seconds.
I was simply saying that this lifestyle, my perception is that this is not a nice to have, it's a need to have. That this is not an optional thing for long-term survivability and sustainability. And I think most Americans are oblivious to that. I think even a lot of people in the air quote prepper community are oblivious to that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's really the hardest part to cultivate, and it's the least sexy part of it. I mean, it's all fun to go buy night vision and bullets and food supplies and tools and all these things, but cultivating a community is the hardest part, because you got to put yourself out there, and it kind of just goes contrary to that individual spirit that we've kind of propagandized. Oh, I will do this and I will do that, and I don't need anyone, and that's just not the case at all. My neighbor, he got the message. Him and his wife are both surgeons. They're not gun people, they're not prepping people, but they're responding to the call. They have a tremendous skill set that I don't have and never will have. And he came to me and he said, how much propane do I need, and how much this and that? And he really feels like he's on the back foot just getting started. And I said, you would be better off to focus on collecting all of the medical stuff you can get. He was telling me about the hospital, how they throw stuff away and they've been hoarding it, bandages, expired medication. I said, you focus on that. You do everything in your power to focus on your expertise, and I will focus on the propane. I will focus on the bullets. And so that kind of took a lot of strain off of me. I don't have to go and learn to be a doctor. I don't have to really make that my priority. I can focus on other things that I know how to do and let him do that. And that's just kind of a small example of how powerful community can be.
I think that's a perfect example. It's been my experience that nothing is more effective than a group of rugged individuals working together as a team towards a common goal. And so, we've had this kind of a American dream, if you will, 40 acres and a mule. I want my 40 acres and a mule, and don't come across my fence line. And That's great. I mean, I've got my 40 acres and a mule too, but I'm surrounded by people that have their 40 acres and their mule. And when we hitch all of our mules together into a mule train, we get a lot of stuff done. You've seen this on grindstone deployments. Everybody there came from somewhere else, and they're all very capable individuals. When you take a group, take a bunch of capable individuals and you put them into a group and you give them mission and purpose and direction, all of a sudden amazing things begin to happen. And I think being able to execute at that scale amidst chaos, regardless of whatever the external stimulus is that caused the chaos, is going to be required. It's going to be a need to have, not a nice to have. And just a lot of people are not picking up on that. I want the brain surgeon. I want the heavy equipment mechanic. I want the farmer, and the nurse and the school teacher. Everybody has their own specialty. That's wonderful, because I'm none of those things. And if we need somebody that has that expertise, there's somebody in the group we can tap on the shoulder and say, hey, you're in charge of that purview. What do you need to make that happen? And to your point, now I don't have to be a surgeon because I know one. I don't have to be a doctor because I know one. I've got one in network. And I think the suburbs and the urban areas have really destroyed that mindset for a lot of people. And I don't see that being productive long term.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I'm not saying that it's going to be impossible to protect your family and to prepare in these urban environments, but you really are going into a fight with your hand tied behind your back. We lived in the city when Mrs. W and I got married. We lived in the same place for 2 years. We invited our neighbors over to dinner when we moved in there. Never once was any of our neighbors in our home. I'd see them every day, where our houses are 6 feet apart, and they were complete strangers to me. There was no interest. There was no desire to get together. And here we out here, my closest neighbor is a long ways away, a quarter mile away, and we're in each other's homes all the time. There's something different about it. I think when you live in these environments, it forces you to be polite, because you know that we got 2 cops on duty in one of the largest counties in the whole state. If you need a cop, he could be an hour away if he comes at all. So just knowing that, I'm going to be polite to my neighbors. I'm going to get to know them because I might need them. I might need a drive into town. I might need who knows what. And I would strongly encourage everyone. I've been talking about this for a long time. At this particular point in time, do whatever you have to do. Move heaven and earth to get yourself removed from these urban areas, these suburbs, and get out. You don't have to have big land, acre and a half. You can do a lot of damage with that. You can grow all the food your family needs on an acre and a half. But more importantly, you're going to be plugged into community. Get involved in the local school board. Get involved in the local fire department. You'll make friends. You just have to put yourself out there. And that's going to be the difference between who survives and who doesn't, who's got a network.
I agree completely. I think the convenience of the high population density areas has created permission for us to disdain, ignore, not interact with the people that live immediately to the left and the right of us. Everybody, parks their car in the 2.5 car garage or whatever it is, or out on the curb, and they rush into their homes, and then they get into their little backyard with the little 6-foot privacy fence around it. And to the extent that they interact with their neighbors, in many cases, it's to call the cops because the neighbors are being too loud, or the kids are playing in the street again, or whatever it is. And it's like, man, these people are assets, potential assets to you, and I don't know, man. I think in a lot of cases, our little windows to hell, our little rectangles, have made us so self-centered and so self-focused, and that contributes to a lot of people mentally, emotionally, spiritually not feeling well, because they don't have a purpose that's greater than themselves. They don't see other people as people. They see other people as obstacles, not as blessings. Now, there are some bad people out there, but praise the Most High, it's not 50-50 good and bad. It's 95-5 maybe. But we don't spend the time to build the context and the dwell time with people in order to understand what makes them tick, what giftings and talents and delights do they have. It's really challenging, even for a guy like me, to look at other people and try and see them the way that Messiah sees them, as precious, right? That these are precious people, even when they annoy me, they're still precious, and that they have value too. So
that's so true. And I also run into that all the time with not only judging other people, especially, if you're a guy that's capable, you've done a lot of jobs, you have a lot of skills. It's very easy to become prideful and to be very judgmental at other men, especially when you go over to their house and you see they don't even have tools, they don't know how to do basic things, and you kind of develop this tier system in your life. And the same thing with kids. I always forget sometime with little kids. My wife always says kids are people too. C.S. Lewis, I think, talked in his book, The Weight of Glory. Remember that these little kids here, this other man that you don't think is on your level, he may sit in judgment of you. He will judge angels one day if he's connected to Messiah. And that's a really good point that you make. It's hard to get away from that prideful, this guy is not as much of a man as I am, so he's not of value to me, when that's not the case. Because my experience with people, when you really get to know them and you start listening for a moment, they will bring something to the table, an asset, a knowledge, an ability, a motivation that you don't possess, that will enhance your group. And if you just dismiss them because they don't have your skill set or they're not like you, man, you're really hindering yourself.
So in Grindstone Ministries, we have more than a dozen different specialties. When we go and deploy somewhere, we just had a team come back from Jamaica, and when we go and deploy somewhere, we do need heavy equipment operators, chainsaw operators. That's important for us. Truck drivers, right? Kind of the more rough and tumble, hydraulic, fluid, diesel, fuel, bar oil kind of men, and in many cases women as well. But what people don't see is how important it is to have somebody filling the role of chaplain for spiritual reasons. The what we call the hands and feet, the people who come and grid search properties foot by foot and are picking people's, the last picture they have of their mom who has passed, it might be, picking that out of the debris. And the logistics of running a yard where we have not only our teams coming and going and the support that they require, but we also have people from the community coming and going and the support that they require, food and medical and water and shelter and bedding and clothing and all of that. Medical staff in the field, at the FOB, in the community, all these different specialties. And so it's easy to look at somebody and go, well, that guy's never run a 462 with a 32-inch bar before. I don't know what we're going to do with him. And it's like, all right, nerd, what do you do? And he's like, well, actually, I'm a brain surgeon. Awesome. Super glad you're here. No wonder your fingernails are so well trimmed. I understand now, and it takes all these different types. And in the prepper community, you tend to see people, the more rough and tumble folks are like, I'm on security. I'm like, that's great. Everybody's on security. We have commoditized security down to the lowest level where everybody is capable of pulling security that's required. Now, what do you actually do? Because, going back to that humility, it's like, got it. You're the security guy. You're also the peel potatoes guy today. You're also the pull the weeds in the garden guy or split firewood guy or whatever it might be. And it takes all these different types of people to build a community. Dunbar's number of 150, that's a village size. Elsewhere, it's quoted as approximately 20 families. If you figure, on average, a family has, say, 5 people in it, that's about 100 people. And that's what it takes. You mentioned earlier, you're in this lovely little bubble where you are. That's excellent. That's how it's been most of human history, is this lovely little bubble full of a smallish group of people. There's enough people there to engage in general labor and specialized labor. There's enough people there for sons and daughters to find a wife or a husband for the rest of their life. There's enough people there to raise a barn. It's not so many people that you can't keep track of who's who and all of that. And with that foundational level of people come enough land, enough water, enough livestock for interbreeding, all these other things that make life possible, that we have automated over the last 100 years. It's become mechanical, then electrical, and then digital, and now it's AGI. Now the robots in the sky, and it's taken away this humanity from us to where we miss what a blessing it is to have a small group of people that intentionally operate together in love. Love your neighbor as yourself. How are you supposed to do that if you don't even know their names? You don't know anything about them. How are we supposed to uphold one half of the commands? Matthew 22:36. Rabbi, Rabbi, teacher, teacher, what do we do? What do we got to do? There's two things, man. Love the Lord your God with everything that you've got, like all of you, and love your neighbor as yourself. You don't even know their name. So how are we supposed to be obedient to that? And so I think a lot of that requires a shifting of the mindset and a shifting of the heart set, to be able to take advantage of these blessings that are right there in front of us and live in a way, frankly, that I think is more biblical than, we're told in the Old Testament, don't live roof upon roof. When I left North Texas, man, there were 12,000 roofs surrounding my roof, and they were all within arm's distance. You could stand in the alleyway between two houses and put your left hand on one house and your right hand on another house. That's a problem. And so we've missed this. We've gotten so far from it. And I think we're going to be required to go back to a more intentional form of existence in order to weather whatever storm is coming.
That's 100% right. I tell the guys on our morning stream, the Western church, by and large, not all, has lost its way. I've been to even small to medium-sized churches I've attended for years and years, and you meet the guy at the door, you see him there, every Sabbath, and how's it going, brother? Oh, everything's fine, and you've never been to his house. He's never been to your house. And we as men, we keep up a front. No one wants to be crying and talking about their troubles. But what you don't know when you're not in the man's house is you don't know that he's got a daughter that's sick, or he's struggling because his furnace is out. They don't have any heat. It's gonna, like you said, it's gonna be the spreading of the gospel and winning people to Christ is going to be done in small groups. It's going to force us, if we're unwilling to have home churches, if we're unwilling to share the gospel and treat our neighbors as brothers, then the persecution will come. We won't be able to meet in these big assemblies, and we'll be forced to. And that's going to be the best thing that could happen, because when you're in a man's house, you see what he is, you see what he's like, you see what he has need of, and you can do something. You get beyond just the bravado and, yeah, everything's great, brother, no problems here, and you see the man for what he is, and that's when you can really start coming together and sharing and helping one another.
That reminds me of a quick story that I think will be beneficial to the audience. Many years ago in North Texas, we knew we were supposed to leave. Had a conviction from the Most High that it was time to go. And it took 3 years of saving money and paying off our debt in order to get up the war chest that was needed in order to deploy against an opportunity to leave. And that in of itself is its own lesson. But it took 3 years of nonstop, 6 days a week, working 14, 16-hour days to pay down the debt and get a lump of money so that we could move, to be obedient to that conviction. And during that time, my wife got really sick. Not like with a cold or the flu. She had some heart stuff going on, and we didn't understand what it was. My wife is a very tough, very capable lady. And when she was bedridden for a week, I knew something was wrong. And one night, I'm trying to get dinner done, get the kids to bed, and I'm trying to be mom, which I'm not great at. And there's a knock at the door. And I open the door, and it's a dozen men from our church, from the men's group, standing on the front step. And they said, "Hey, can we pray over your wife?" I said, "Yes, please." So had a little house that should have been hit with a bulldozer, not a great house. So they come in, and my wife was in bed. So I get a chair from the dining room table, set it in the middle of the living room, go into my bedroom, pick my wife up out of bed, carry her to the chair, and set her into the chair. And these men circled around my wife, My son was there, and he was little at the time, maybe 6, little at the time. They circled up, we all laid hands on her, and we went around one by one, praying over my wife. And I will never forget the sound of my 6-year-old son praying over his mom. It was beautiful. So we wrap up, and it was awesome, and hugs and thank yous, and they leave. I pick my wife back up and put her back in the bed. We go to sleep. I wake up the next morning, and you're in that moment of twilight in between wakefulness and sleep, and I can smell coffee, and I start slapping the side of the bed looking for my wife, and the bed's empty. And I'm like, oh crap, she rolled out of bed and she's on the floor or something. I got to pick her up off the floor. But she's not there. I get up and I walk into the kitchen. She's holding a cup of coffee and she goes, good morning. I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, I woke up and I feel good. I feel better. And I broke. Dude, I just melted, because this is my helpmeet. This is my rib. This is my wife, and she's better. But it took the intervention, the intercessory prayer of a dozen men, curious number, by the way, to come into my home, to be able to physically touch my wife and intercede on behalf of her and present us to the throne of the Most High for the preservation of life. And that doesn't just happen if you don't know people and if they don't know you. And that's how the body of Christ, the ecclesia, is supposed to function. But we miss that because we lack the context with one another, because the context breeds comfortability to be able to bear with your brother in love, to be able to confess to one another, to say, yeah, man, I am going through some stuff. And so I would just encourage everybody within the sound of our voice right now, if you are going through some stuff, you have to raise your hand and say that you are, because if you don't, we're actually missing out twice here. You're missing out on the opportunity for somebody to intercede for you, and that brother or sister is missing out on the opportunity to be obedient to the Most High, to intercede on your behalf. And so it seems like weakness to be able to say, hey man, I'm going through some stuff, I need some help. But it's actually a double-sided blessing there when we do raise our hand and say, yo, I need help with this. I am overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's true. And I've had that similar experience. And it's a difficult thing if you're a proud man to ask other men to come in and to help you out. My dad, I remember growing up, my dad was a capable guy. He was a general contractor. I never once ever remembered another man coming in to fix the roof, to fix the furnace, to do whatever. He did everything. He was very proud of that independence. Unfortunately, for good or for bad, I mean, I got a lot of that as well. And you, like you said, you cut yourself off from a lot of blessings if you are too proud to have someone come in and help you when you're in need, or to pray for you. And it's better to get over that and to do it, rather than to have God have to force you, to humble you to the point where you have no choice, where you can no longer help yourself, and he will take you to your knees and you will learn a lesson. It's better for you to do that, get ahead of that, than to carry that pride so far that God has to humble you and to teach you that lesson the hard way.
I concur 100%. I've had people ask me, Pastor Bear, have you heard God's voice and what does he sound like? And yes, I have. And when I have heard his voice, he wasn't happy. And the reason he wasn't happy was because I didn't listen the first dozen times that he told me gently to, son, I need you to do this thing. Okay, sure. Yep, I'll get around to that, Dad. Working on it. Yeah. Yes, but I've got these other things going on, until finally he's like, do what I told you to do. Crap. Yeah, yes, sir. Understood. And so every time I've heard his voice, it's been stern and forceful, because I wasn't obedient to the dozens of urgings and gentle proddings that I was given prior to that.
Yeah. It's very similar. I watched it take place with my dad. My sister, when she was probably about 12 or 13, we were raised in a kind of a crazy Christian cult where we were forbidden to associate with anyone outside of it. It was a completely closed community. We were also forbidden to have any contact with it. You're not able to go to a hospital, no medical care. If you had a problem or a disease or a broken bone, you would call the elders and they would deal with it in prayer. And it was a rough thing because if you didn't get healed, then it was accounted to you, well, you just lacked faith. And my sister had a ruptured appendix and was dying. She was just little, and I watched my dad humble that way. I watched God humble my dad in that way, where he was forced to call people to come over. And just like your experience with your wife, the elders came over and everyone confessed their sins and we laid hands on the girl. And I was just little. I was probably, I just remembered as a child. But I remember that my father being so prideful, not calling for help, not needing prayer, not needing community, and watching his daughter die. He was almost willing to take it to the grave, but that's what broke him. Seeing his daughter on death's door is what finally humbled him, and that's what caused him to call for help. And that it was I'll never forget that.
It's interesting you bring that up. I believe firmly that there is massive power in intercessory prayer. I also think, don't get me started on pharmacology, but surgical interventions are absolutely life-saving. The Father has given us doctors. We should use doctors when needed. I've had a busted appendix. I'm still here because I had a surgery. And so I think, I know people that are still alive, many people that are still alive because they've had surgeries. I think that should be rightly separated out from, your blood pressure's 2 points high. Here's a medication you have to take for the rest of your life. Or here's an experimental medicine that we're going to force the entire world to take. I think that's a different instance than a surgical intervention. I mean, Dudley, who's on the other side of the camera, it was not that long ago that his son was life flighted up to Tulsa because of envenomation from a pygmy rattlesnake. And we did pray over that. I prayed with them in the back of the ambulance. And then we hauled ass to the children's hospital where they had crowfab. And his son is still here. And so, we're supposed to be wise as a serpent and then gentle as a dove. And there are people that are the Father's people too that are inside of these medical systems that have giftings and talents and delights for the preservation of life, and we should make use of them, while also not, I think, engaging in experimental medications. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's where I fall on it too. I couldn't agree more. I'm not into the pharmacology, the experimental stuff, and just throwing drugs at it. I think we need people to set bones. We need people to deal with breech birth. We need people to deal with, a ruptured appendix. 100%. Yeah, I don't have much to add. I agree 100%.
So a couple weeks ago or so, you and I were texting, and the topic of conversation was everything, everywhere, all at once, which is something that I've been talking about, since probably September of this year. So September, October, November, December, about 4 months. I believe, that we have, my current assessment is that we have a 30% likelihood within the next 12 months of life as we know it changing drastically in the United States of America, to include an 8-front war, and one of those fronts being here. I'm curious to know, on your end, do you concur, and if so, why? What are you seeing on your end, and if so, how are you preparing for
that? I don't know that I have anything concrete to point to you, but I guess one of the benefits that you and I both share is we have a wide reach and access to a lot of very interesting people with very interesting jobs that feed us data and information. Now, without we are operating at extreme capacity. Just for example, I have a friend that works for a major power company that feeds the main transfer lines, DC lines, down to California. And he tells me at peak power, he goes, they step away from it. They kind of pull back when that thing's really humming. And they're like, we don't even know how this thing is still working. you know, and he tells me, this system is so fragile. This is just one of the many systems. This power system is so fragile that one guy on a hill with a 30-06 could end 20% of the power to California. And it's not guarded. And it's very, 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 very delicate. So I hear things like that, and I hear other things, and I realize that I couldn't agree more. Another thing, just the spiritual component of it. Even people, I've got family members that thought when we were 20 years ago, when we decided to sell our nice house that we had my wife had a 6-figure income. We were living large, nice home, beautiful cars, just the absolute American dream. When we got married, God really convicted us to get out of the city and to start moving in this direction. Our family thought it basically came down to an intervention. Like they thought we had lost our minds, move away to an off-grid place, give up these salaries, give up these things. And we've had a lot of problems with these sorts of people and just thought us to be written us off, thought us to be completely crazy. Just in the last 6 months, TJ, these people are coming to me with their hat in their hand. Hey, we're really concerned. We can see it. These are normies. I mean, these are urban people. These are not prepper type. These are not our people. And they're terrified. They're fearful, and they want to know what to do. They're telling me now, we're going to come out and live with you, and what should I do? And they're showing up with checklists. So there's just, for things that I hear from people that are in positions to know things that concerns me, just the general sense of concern and trouble and fear from people that were not awake just 6 months, 12 months ago, all just points to me that there's something big happening, something catastrophic. And I'm not fearful about it. I have done what I can do. You can never prep enough. You can never have enough bullets. You can never have enough medical stuff. And you can be filled with anxiety from that. But you have to realize you're only one person. You're only a small group. It's our responsibility to do what we can where we're at with what we have. And it's the Father's responsibility to make up the slack and to provide for us when we're in need. And he's no respecter of persons. So if you haven't been prepping for 20 years, you're not a second-class citizen. Do what you can where you're at. Move heaven and earth to get yourself in a better situation, trusting God to fill in the gaps.
I agree with that completely, that last bit there. But I think that to whom much is given, much is required. So if you have the capability, but you don't put in the effort, that does not produce blessings as a result. I could go 100 different directions here, but with the power grid, it is very fragile. That's basically the industry I've been in most of my life. I grew up in that industry. Some of my earliest memories are sitting on my dad's lap on top of a dozer plowing in cable. And so it's kind of the family. My family has done two things: United States military and lineman, power construction, and telecom to a lesser extent, and sometimes both, in many cases both. And so I grew up in that industry. I've constructed a lot of it. And it was fragile 20 years ago when I started building it. And, I have personally been involved in the construction of more than 1,500 miles of high line that doesn't even put a dent in the system as far as building capacity. Now you increase the demand, both from continued development in the populous areas, and then more importantly, these data centers that are going in that demand not just electricity, but water as well. We find ourselves in an actual resource battle with computers all of a sudden. It's no longer science fiction. It's actually true. And I've watched the documentary Terminator 2, and I don't like the way that goes. So not really interested in that. And then, as far as the normies waking up, I'm seeing a lot of that for lots of different reasons. I live in eastern Oklahoma, in a rural area surrounded by a lot of just salt of the earth people that Uh, 7, almost 8 years ago when we moved here, you know, I was the weird prepper guy is just trying to talk to people about, hey, should you have a radio so that I could talk to you if the power goes out? Like, nah, it's fine. And now they're all like, so what's that radio frequency again? What's the community plan in case things go sideways? Because they're starting to see it. And I think on a long enough timeline here, and this is one of the things that concerns me, is it doesn't matter which data set I look at. If I look at the economic data set, if I look at the utility infrastructure data set, if I look at the geopolitical data set, if I look at the military and conflict data set, if I look at domestic politics, whatever I look at, I keep coming back to, regardless of which layer of the lasagna it is that I'm examining, the timeline is always 12 months, 12 months, 12 months. It's early 2027. And so any one of these layers of the lasagna, any one of these data sets is potentially catastrophic for life as we know it in the United States of America. When you stack them all on top of each other, that's when things start to get, to borrow a phrase, truly biblical as far as the impact on American society. And 87 different times in the Bible, there's 3 things that go together. It's famine, war, famine, and plague. Those 3 things go together. So conflict, a lack of food, and then disease. And one begets another. They all go together. There's 87 different instances biblically of war, famine, and plague. And so again, I go back to, we are living in an anomaly that is coming to an end, to where we will have to take more radical personal responsibility and aggressively prepare for what's coming, to do the best that we can with the giftings and talents and delights and resources that the Father has given us for the preservation of life. And as somebody, I've been doing this YouTube thing for 8 years. Resiliency is no longer optional. I've tried to apply apologetics over the last 8 years to try and make people see the light, and you should come on board, and you can get started, and it's easy and it's cheap, and it just takes a little bit of time, and don't worry about it. And I've shifted scope now to where if you are brand new at this, that's great. Go watch the Prepper Classroom playlist. It's from 5 years ago, and all the information is still good. But I'm no longer speaking directly to those people. I'm speaking to the people in the Bear Nation and elsewhere that have a calling here for the preservation of life, so that we can positively impact what's coming, so that we happen to the world doesn't happen to us. So we have these little, Pastor Joe calls them islands of stability, and I love that phrase. These little islands of stability amid chaos, that when other people realize, oh man, it's really hit the fan and this is bad, there are islands of stability that we can positively influence the world around us, rather than being negatively influenced by the world around us, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree with you. For me personally, I think a lot of other people, the reaction, how people reacted and behaved during COVID was a great shaking of the tree, a separating of the goats from the sheep, has been my experience. We really trimmed the fat. We really found out who were our people and who were not our people. We had people that I thought were our people that turned on us, if it would have went to the next level, if it would have escalated, they would have wished for our death or downfall. They would have actively worked against us. This would have been family members and friends. So I would agree with you. I'm much less likely to be generous and to waste time casting my pearls before swine if people didn't react and didn't wake up from that experience and really look around and start making preparation. It's almost to the point now, I would agree with you. I'm not going to say the doors are closed, but I'm going to be focusing on the people that are actually willing to do something about this and that are awake. And I agree 100%. Year, 18 months, something's going to happen. And the linchpin of all of it is the power grid. Best case scenario, the power grid is going to be rationed, just like World War II. You couldn't buy cars, you couldn't get copper pennies. There was a lot of things you couldn't get because those resources went to the common good, to the war effort. And now that we're in basically an arms race with data centers and who can build the fastest thinking computers and AI, it's a matter of survival. Those resources, those power resources, are going to be rededicated to that fight. And that might mean blackouts. That might mean rural areas that are no longer getting power. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, we have a cascading effect and the whole thing goes down. And that's going to be, I've heard speculations. People say if the power were to completely go down, that 90% of the people would perish within the first year. And I used to think that that was crazy talk. But the more I think about it, and I'm more how dependent these people are upon the power system, they will not be able to function. I will suffer. Our community here will suffer greatly, and there'll be major, major compromises that need to be made. And we've thought about it. We've worked on it. How about people who are just now sticking their head up out of the ground and like, huh? They're now talking about getting a hand crank radio and a flashlight. I mean, if you're at that point right now, I wouldn't want to be in that position.
I'm thankful that I am not in that position. And it's one of the things that I've been saying to people for probably the last year and a half or 2 years now is that we who are covered by the blood of the Lamb have an unfair advantage, and that is wisdom and discernment from the Spirit, and that we need to use it, because I'm convinced there are going to be people that show up that have nothing, but they belong to the Most High and they're good people that I'm supposed to help. And I'm also convinced that there's going to be people that show up that have everything, billionaire status. Why don't you move Bear Camp to my bunker in the mountains? Nope, not interested, because they are not of the Most High. And so we need to employ that wisdom and discernment to the best of our ability. There is a hardship or a hardness, I should say, that again used to exist in our societies. And this is not me pining over what was. It's me acknowledging that what was will be again. Whether you have calluses on your hands or not, simply being able to, for example, in the summers here in Oklahoma, when it's 110 in the shade and 80% humidity, and there's no air conditioning, you're going to need to be able to deal with that. The winters where you are significantly worse than the winters are here. You're going to need a plan to be able to deal with that, using as few electrons as possible. And World War II rationing, you're correct. One of the things that I would keep an eye on is that, right now our modern vehicles, which we're not really manufacturing any more of because of a shortage on chips, that's an indicator. Our modern vehicles, I can foresee a potential scenario where we get deep enough into conflict, external conflict, where our modern vehicles are being bought back or requisitioned from the government and the Department of Defense to be cannibalized for aluminum and steel and chips and lithium and cobalt and all these other things for the war machine. And going back to zero-day exploit, which is what I started with the show with, if you have a vehicle that receives over-the-air updates, right, which a lot of these vehicles do, I would not bet upon those vehicles working during a conflict, because the information space is going to be contested. It's already contested. We had hell this morning just going live together. While we were trying to go live, I was receiving texts from different people about their bank software not working, can't access their accounts. Yep. And so on a long enough timeline, all these pigeons come home to roost at the same time. It's going to be utter chaos for those that haven't made the appropriate preparations, which include the physical preparations, your body for sure, and then all the stuff that goes with it to feed your body and equip your body, but also the mental and the spiritual aspects of this as well. Our Messiah suffered and died because the Father required it of him so that there would be atonement for us. He was hated and reviled. The servant is not greater than the master. So what expectation do I have? Oh no, it's going to get hard. Awesome. The flip side of that is also true. We were fearfully and wonderfully made for this time. It's not an accident that we are here during this time. And so that to me goes to, and maybe it's my workaholic aspect, but that to me goes to, well, there's an expectation from the Most High to be managed in me, that He intentionally put me and us on this earth at this time that we are going to experience this. So then, okay, knowing that expectation is there, what is that? Well, love the Lord your God with everything you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. So be good to the good people and, frankly, be bad to the bad people. And that's how I see it going forward if the train does come off the tracks. That DOE paper that you cited, 90% in 12 months, I concur with that. And it's a third in the first 30 days. And that's something that most people are oblivious to. It's a third of the American population in the first 30 days. And after 12 months, it's 90%, because American life is predicated on the successful flow of electrons. And I'm telling you, that's going to go away. If I was the bad guy, it'd be the first thing I'd take away. And even if there's no bad guys, there's a little thing called rust that is working against us and has been for the last 20 years. So.
Yeah. And I'm apprehensive about what's coming, but I am not full of fear, because I know it needs to come. We will not do what God wants us to do. We won't love our neighbor as ourselves. We won't have them into our house. We won't come together. We won't do the work effectively. So He's going to bring about situations that will force us to do it. And as bad and as dire as it sounds, it is a high, high honor to be called out of Babylon for the work. He's promised us that He knows what we have need of before we ask, and we can stand on that promise. How many times does the scripture say, do not be fearful? I take a very sober view on it. I also realize, like you said, when much is given, much is expected. I realize the obligation that comes before it. If you're going to get up here on this internet and have live streams and be preaching to His people and to His children, it is a heavy, heavy responsibility that's not lost on me. But it's also a high honor to be here in this position. And I'm not going to say I'm looking forward to it. In my worst times, I mean, those of us that have spent 20 years preparing, we would kind of like to, how will I do? A man likes to be tested against his peers. I'm not going to say that, but I am not going to go into it fearful. And I think that what's going to come out on the other side and the amazing things that we'll be able to do. Remember when the disciples, they marveled over the miracles that Christ did, and He looked at them and said, "Oh, you think this is cool? I tell you the truth, you will do greater things than these in the end days." And I honestly believe the church has been talking about end times. I honestly believe that there may be people alive today that see the second coming, whether that be me or my children, I'm not sure. But things are different. It's different than it was growing up with the preaching of the coming of Christ. The whole world is changing, and you have to be completely blind not to see that something major's coming.
As my pastor, Pastor Joe Fox of Viking Preparedness, says, I bought the ticket. I want to take the ride. And brother, I've got a few more minutes that I can spend with you today. Again, thank you for your time. I do want to shift gears on you real quick, because I'm interested in your opinion. So this time of year in December, inside of Refuge Medical, we always we take this time to plan for what does the coming year look like. And I was at a meeting earlier where we were talking about product launches for 2026. And so, to put you completely on the spot as a Refuge Medical end user, what would Cody at Wranglerstar like to see us produce or make available to the world in 2026? You got any thoughts on that?
Making it simple for folks. It's very overwhelming. Just to go, I'm a former medic. I was a medic with a career fire department. I've been around it. I've ran hundreds of traumas and car accidents, and so I know my way around it. But for someone who doesn't know, to show up at Refuge Medical and to see all the different kits and why is this one so much more expensive when you don't know, I think I think what the first thing that comes to mind, I'll just speak it out, is to have. I like the bucket system. A bucket for to deal with childbirth, a bucket to deal with minor surgeries, a bucket to deal with burn, or whether it be buckets or individual cuts, but really boil it down and make it simple, folks. Maybe a one, two, three. What's your budget? If you've got $100, do this. If you've got $1,000, do this. If you've got $5,000, this is what we recommend. Something you already have everything. The kits are good, the information's there. I guess just putting it, packaging it in a way that someone showing up on the site can follow the the tree and with what they have and get the most for their money without having to go and to get an entire education on what I need. It can be daunting.
I appreciate that. I took notes on that, and I will let the team know. Yeah, I agree with you. It's if you have no touch point in pre-hospital trauma medicine whatsoever, it's like, what the hell do I buy? and then more importantly, what do I do with it? Because the entire world suffers from possession does not equate to proficiency. Simply having the stuff doesn't mean you know how to use the stuff. And so heard and appreciated. I'm glad that you like the bucket system. That's cool. I've got some notes from my meeting before this regarding buckets and totes and levels. So for everybody who's out there paying attention, continue to pay attention. Cody, you got anything? Go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you the truth, and this is if you haven't experienced a medical trauma, even me, I'll tell you, even me with all of the contact and all, I've got the kits and I've got them on the head. I mean, I got half your product line, sprinkled all around through the house. Everything's within reach in a moment. But when your 7-year-old or your 8-year-old daughter trips and gashes her head on the corner of the table and blood is running everywhere and she's screaming and everyone's hysterical, it is hard to get a handle on that and to deal with complexity. I mean, you'll know perfectly. You can have the best organized and the best laid out kit, and after a situation like that, it's just crap is everywhere. You're flinging that thing open and you're pulling stuff out, and I mean, it's really, really difficult to operate. So simplicity is the key. Simplicity, so you can see something clearly labeled. This is for burns. This is for major. This is for what, and just keeping it simple and. I guess I just leave to it's very important. Power, firearms, all these things are fun, but we've also gotten very used to call the ambulance, call 911, go out, drive into the hospital, get the best care in the world, and those options are diminishing. Even just financially, some people are unable to have access to this. You live in rural countries, and anything that goes off, like I said, we got 2 cops that run the whole county. We got 1 car what if it's doing a transport to Portland? No one's coming to save you.
Yep.
And can you imagine how you would feel if you had a little one that bled out, or a neighbor or a friend or a wife, for lack of a tourniquet or lack of just a basic understanding of this stuff? It is very, very important, and it's going to be more so. It's going to be as important as water in the coming times.
I still get the that little bit of anxiety right before I intervene. That space in between grabbing the kit out of the truck or whatever, grabbing the kit off of my kit and then laying hands on people, that space in between, putting them gloves on, there's still a little wiggle in my hands right there. And then the wiggle goes away the moment I start. But I'd be lying if I was saying, yeah, there's not a little bit of trepidation there, but I'm just built. I'm just built to. The Father has made me to put my hands on people, and for the preservation of life, whether that's medical or spiritual, whatever else it might be. And so, for everybody who's listening that maybe has zero frame of reference, like you said, with a trauma situation or any pre-hospital medicine, wilderness medicine, or just nursing or childbirth, whatever it is, I get the wiggles in my hands too, until I actually touch the patient, and then it's go time. It's like everything clears and okay, breathe, focus, look, observe, triage, start running through checklists in my head, and then stuff just starts happening. But for me, it's just go. Get the kit, get the gloves, go. But in that space in between getting the gloves on and going, yeah, I still get the wiggles too, man. And that's okay. You just overcome the wiggles and then go for the preservation of life. Brother, I've got to jump. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with today?
It's I always enjoy speaking with you, and I also want to. I'm going to gloss you a little bit. I got to tell you that the morning briefings those are gold to us. I rock in the morning, before my family wakes up, and I listen to your podcasts and all of that every morning, and I take and plagiarize everything that you say and share it with my guys. So I really do appreciate that, those updates. The fact, if you're just watching and just coming on this, TJ's got a lot of, I'm not going to out anyone, but he's got a lot of ears to the ground, and he gets information, and you have a great way of passing that on in a way that's digestible without fear mongering, and it's genuine. It's very, very helpful to me and very comforting. So I would encourage you to keep doing that. I know it's hard. It's easy to focus on the negative and all the haters when you run this or do this online, but I can tell you that you're doing a lot of good work, and a lot of men are benefiting immensely from these daily updates, especially me. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that very much. And I'll tell you this, you getting into the forge a few months ago was a motivator for me to do the same. And there's a cable machine and a treadmill right over there on the other side of the office, because I put them in the office because I have no excuse now. They're right there. I walk past them 100 times a day, and it's not like I can't find the time. In fact, the last live stream that we did together, right before we jumped on, I had just finished my last set on a cable machine, and I was both sweaty and hopped up on pre-workout. So you've been a benefit to me in that way and myriad other ways. And I will again reiterate, it was an honor to spend time with you during Hurricane Helene. And I hope, be it the Father's will, that that's not the last time we get to breathe the same air. And I know a lot of people, many people have seen you on the internet and might have wondered, what's up with this guy, this Wranglerstar guy? You are legit. You get the bear stamp of approval. You know how to do all the things that you say you know how to do. You don't do things that you don't know how to do. And what I think a lot of people don't understand, and I didn't understand until we were in the same place at the same time together, is there is a peace about you. There is a spiritual peace about you that, as your brother in Christ, I like being in the same place that you are, because I can feel that. And I know for millions of people on the internet, they've not had the opportunity to experience that from you, but I count it a blessing that I have had that opportunity. And so I'm very thankful for that. And I think we lost Cody. Hopefully he comes back. Well, Dud, we're at the end of our time anyway. Shout out to J.A. Dudley behind the camera. We couldn't do this show without Dudley. He's incredible. He has his own YouTube channel. You should be following him. I'm in Refuge Medical right now. You should be following Refuge Medical. And you should, of course, be subscribed to Wranglerstar. I'm a member on the Wranglerstar channel, and I benefit greatly from that. So I'd encourage you to consider membership over there as well. Cody, thank you so much for your time today. And as always, if there's anything we can do for you, just please let us know.
All right. Thank you, TJ.
Bless y'all, everybody.